This event is brought to you by World Pro Racing, the Malta Motorsport Federation, GMR Entertainment, WJ England & Son, Melita, Media Looks, Restream.io, Gaming Malta, VisitMalta.com, and TVM Sport. This stream is powered by Melita, using Melita Gigapower Internet. World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
This is so dangerous. You are risking not only your life, but also my life.
wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi, assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real. Round two. And round two of a 4-round championship means you have to be alert and on it. This is a little bit different from where we were just 1 week ago, looking at the Nürburgring and how really aggressive drivers had to be around that place. We move to the Temple of Speed. We are looking at Monza, and we are looking at a HyperX Endurance Championship, which has all the hallmarks and makings of one which needs to be conquered right now on the road to 2021. My name's Jake Sperry. That's just about over there is Nicholas Hillebrand here alongside me for the action here today. 90 minutes worth of racing, and the goal to finish first. And first, you must finish. That is the motto of endurance racing. And Nicholas, when we talk about today, when we talk about how alluring this track can be, how this car and track combination has been such a stalwart for the likes of the 24-hour series, for the likes of, say, Blancpain, this is pretty much hand in matrimony.
Yeah, the GT3 cars are definitely well versed with handling Monza. You know, we are quite used to seeing a lot of good slipstream battles here. We had our Lamborghini challenge here before, and some of our drivers from this HyperX Endurance Championship are already, were already present in that race. So I think a couple of them want to follow up on their good result there, and others want to improve on their result there. Of course, they're now, I think none of them are driving the Lamborghini right now, but of course still Group 3 cars that we have in Gran Turismo Sport, and it should definitely be an interesting race today.
And it certainly will. It'll be here with World Pro Racing on YouTube, on Facebook Live, on Twitch as well. It is with TBM Sport. It is with, of course, motorsport.tv. And on top of that, it is with ESTV, the Esports Television Network. Now, it's all about focus. It's all about how do you get to the next level? And we have seen one driver put himself up at the very, very top. That is Kyokudo, who is still, even now, at this stage, from where we were earlier on in the start of summer to right now where we are here on the back end of September, pretty much almost unbeaten at this stage. We have a little look live here to coverage at the moment. The lights are on here around this place, and it's important to know that you can choose any vehicle that you like when it comes to championship decisions. Kyokudo has moved to an American-style vehicle right now. That is a Corvette. that is wanting to try and make sure that it masters here just outside of Milan.
Yeah, I think everyone who's into racing knows Corvettes and straight lines, like Monza has quite plenty of. They go well together, like bread and butter. And Kyokudo, I think once again he's quite on top of things. He's in touch with his car and the track, and the others will certainly be looking once again at a mountain to conquer when facing him.
Well, this is where the challenge is going to be, and of course the two nearest challengers over the course of pace that we have seen. There is Windy piloting around the Aston Martin V12, looking to try and get all of the grunt of power that those 12-cylindered engine has available to it. That could be something that really pays off in the long term, and that's something really novel here from Mikhail at this stage, jumping into a Mustang to try and get the challenge working. It's not often that you see a Mustang make itself known when it comes to this place, but this is one of the few tracks where there aren't too many corners. And if you've known Top Gear and very old Top Gear in the past, of course there was the old joke that Mustangs were very scared of corners, Nicholas.
Yeah, definitely, but especially with the top three right now, I think you can see at the moment how it is with 1, 2, 3, V8, V12, V8. There simply is no replacement for displacement, apparently. And it's very interesting to see, of course, how Mikhail goes the American route as well, but, of course, with a rival company to Chevrolet, so to say.
And of course, in-game time here in terms of when they start, Ivan then in 4th position in the V12 Vantage was effectively best of the rest compared to the top 3, is going to be starting at 20:35 or 8:30 in-game time in the evening. So what that means is that we've got ourselves a night race. Here is Shalinu in 5th position, also going the Aston Martin route, which seems to be the most populous of the manufacturers here today. But up and down the order, we see a few differences. Deman has gone into the Aston Martin as well, so no surprises there. Looking to try and make that all work out quite nicely. But this is practice. This is about finding your feet in the early goings. Ilwindi also going for the Aston Martin as well. It seems like we are in Aston Martin territory, and it's just been proven by a new fastest lap here in practice. Mr. Collin also going to the Aston Martin. Windy is at the very top.
Honestly, it seems like a very balanced car. When you see people tackling corners, it seems to be quite on top of the situation. There we have Kenneth with another Corvette, and I'm going to be interested to see what Chris Pateri is actually in which car. Because, another Mustang. So we have a quite dominant field here with front engine cars. Front engine rear wheel drive, of course, and V8 or V12. And yeah, I think generally that seems to be the best way to tackle this circuit right now.
It's very much take your pick of high speed around this place. 1.5 tenths of a second then for Windy Boy in the golden V12 Vantage, looking to try and make some big progress here today. 3rd place in the opening round of the championship last time out, and was very much, I would say at this stage, Nicholas, outclassed by both Kyokudo and also one Mr. Mikhail as well. So the key around this place today is about staying calm, not making mistakes, and keeping that number that Kyokudo's got on the screen right now down to a minimum. The slowdown penalties here today are going to be really, really strong because of the stop-start nature, because of how easy it is to cut around this sort of place.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be difficult for the drivers. You mentioned it just now, the stop-start nature. We have a couple of chicanes here, not just 1 or 2. I think most of the overtaking maneuvers will happen into the chicanes, of course, as is usual with Monza. But the nature of these chicanes, especially the Variante del Retofiglio and della Roggia, the first 2 chicanes of this circuit, you know, they're just so difficult because they're so tight. So you're constantly just trying to get the maximum run out of it. And of course, you have to stay clean for that. And then for Ascari, of course, and for all the other corners, you have to have the maximum momentum. And that's just going to be so difficult. Not necessarily at turn 3 at Cova Grande, because you just take the inside line there. But Delesmo And then, of course, the Parabolica. You can run wide so easily there. And of course, at Ascari as well. I think Ascari is the easiest place where you can gain a lot of time, but also lose a lot of time by just carrying yourself wide.
And it's so easy to gain and lose time around here. This is a very simple track from the outside looking in. It's a very stop-start circuit as we've been talking about, but there's a reason why this track has been one of the longest-serving tracks in all of the world of racing. For so long, it has been a place where people have been testing their speeds, not just say on this more modern layout, which of course came to be in the year 2000, but more rather as well what it used to be, the double chicanes of the 90s. You have the likes there of more issues going on for Mikael, who has a 4-second slowdown then after that opening section. But on top of that, you talk about the old oval banking, which used to be so prevalent and important, especially for something that we don't really have here today, for Ferraris.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, everyone who has ever watched the movie Grand Prix, the very old one, still filmed in the 60s during the actual season. That, if you haven't watched it, I can only recommend it. The story, you know, like as it is for racing movies, isn't necessarily great, but just in color, having onboard footage of that time and, you know, seeing so much colored footage and actually just seeing those cars in action, because they actually recorded it over the F1 season. Seeing that on Monza, and they actually have this nice bit where they talk about how bumpy the oval is, how frightening it is. So definitely a step forward in safety that isn't being driven on anymore. It is a temple of speed, it always has been, and I think, you know, that is actually the main reason why a lot of people have chosen the Aston Martin here today, because it is one of the older cars. I think it is around 2012 that it was homologated for the GT3 class. So, not too much in terms of aero yet, but with that humongous V12 and that screaming sound, you know, it does put a lot of power on the road.
It certainly does, and this could be something where we see the Aston Martins really come into their own here today. A little bit of penalty for Ivan going through the opening chicane there. That's going to be having to be managed throughout the entirety of this event. And what will also be key is staying within the margins. And we're talking about gap margins, car to car. Being within a couple of tenths of a second here or there on any straight will give you a huge advantage. This is a slipstreaming track, Nicholas, so it's going to be a case of maybe being best placed. Maybe we're not going to see drivers running away with things as we have done previously.
Yeah, I think there's definitely less time to be gained here. Of course, there's a lot of time to be lost, and you have to drive precise, especially because you just don't have that many corners where you can lose time. But in those corners, in that little amount of corners where you can lose time, you can lose a lot of time, you know, which can be shown by Windy, Kyokodo, and Mikael, who are just, you know, once again our top 3 runners. And I think right now would be the best chance for everyone who isn't that fast to actually be closer to the front, simply just by trying to stay as close to the front runners as possible from the start up. Getting sucked up by the slipstream right to the back of them, and you know, then just trying to stay there instead of making a move. Of course, by making a move, you can slow others down, you can get them under stress. But the benefits that you have when you're just in the slipstream, just sitting there, you can save so much fuel, you can make a longer run, and well, I'm going to be interested to see how the strategy is going to play out today.
This is a high fuel usage circuit here around this place. We could be seeing maybe strategy on super soft tyres for everybody from one start to the end. There is almost 75 to 80% throttle application around this place. Not many places where you can get that opportunity to really slow down. And that's going to be worth keeping in mind as we head over to qualifying in about the next minute or so, Nicholas. And we've seen it so many times before around Monza. It's about track position. It's about making sure you know where the quickest car in terms of outright pace is and shadowing.
Yeah, it definitely is the case. I think Windy, with his current pace, he's already starting to knock on the door of Kyokodo, and, you know, just trying to make sure that he's being recognized as a threat, maybe put a little bit of stress in the subconscious of Kyokodo, and I'm really interested to see how it will play out, if this strategy will work. And yeah, if Mikhail maybe can get some more time as well, we of course know that Kyokudo is one of the unbeatable forces, more or less, in qualifying. So, yeah, let's see what happens. And I wish everyone, of course, the best of luck and that they get their maximum potential into their lap time.
The pressure will tell right now. There will be qualifying coming up, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. If you haven't already, make sure you like, you share, you subscribe, you comment, you do all of the basics when it comes to us and in terms of getting on some amazing action. And if you have not already, ladies and gentlemen, just head over to worldproracing.com, because there could be the opportunity for prizes. There are the opportunities, of course, to join an elite online gaming community with so much amazing racing that goes on, not just, say, here today, because tomorrow we're heading over to Hockenheim for Formula 3 action with R Factor 2 here on Gran Turismo Sport. The HyperX Endurance Championship Round 3 will be next week, 1 week from now, and then we'll have a week's break before the finale of the championship on October the 13th. So you definitely want to tune in, and you definitely want to be in with a shout of just watching, listening, and maybe if you are enjoying some of the action, get yourself an opportunity to be in and having a good go of things. Right now, though, qualifying is currently underway. They have 20 minutes, 2 minutes of that already gone. The focus on Kyokudo right now, just behind Windy. That is prime for the way you want to start a qualifying lap. So now, here is how you go around this Monza circuit. Long front stretch, of course, which leads to the braking zone here. Watch for your markers here, and you can see how late they're braking, about 120 meters into the Rettifilo. Turn 1, turn 2, and then on the power as early as you dare. Do not understeer out wide onto the exit. Now the long turn number 3. This is Curva Grande, which is completely flat for these drivers today as they run around and look for turn 4 and 5, which is going to be the break to the Della Roggia, the second chicane, and arguably you could say a tougher chicane, a more open chicane on entry, but a tough one on exit with that anti-cut curve on the inside. Lesmo 1 and Lesmo 2 next, Nicholas.
Yeah, and these are quite difficult corners to get 100% right. Third gear, and it's just barely that area where downforce starts kicking in. Then, of course, Lesmo 2, so difficult to get right because of the weird camber that it has. If you take a bit too much, you touch the inside curb. Now through this little kink here, Curva del Seraglio, and now going underneath the old oval. And that is just so nice to see how the track is still in touch with its tradition. Now, Variante Ascari, well known to everyone who's ever watched any race, I think, here. And yeah, just completely through fourth gear. No risks whatsoever, but he takes a nice and smooth line. It's really good, just nice to see that. Up to sixth gear. Does he make it up to 260? Yes, 262 before he brakes. Down to third gear into Parabolica. And lets himself get carried nice and wide to the outside. And now back inside to minimize the way he has to go, and let's see what sort of lap time he's putting in.
Well, Mika was the benchmark, but Windy has gone and improved on that. A 1:46.1, Ivan on a 47.8, so the time does not count then for one driver out there, and that one, of course, belongs to Kyokudo, who did not manage the time that was needed. Pushing wide through the final corner, I think, was the reason why Kyokudo's lap time was invalidated in terms of the run. So there is a lot more to be found then over the course of 15 more minutes worth of racing. Chris Spiteri on a 59.9, not a representative time. Same for Kenneth, 2:07 flat. Not representative, but we'll be looking for time the longer that this goes on. So Windy from Mikhail and Deman, currently your top 3 at the moment, but there's not really too many surprises right now. The question will become, now how much damage do they mitigate in terms of the championship? Remember, Windy finished 3rd, Mikhail 2nd, and Kyokudo 1st 1 week ago. Now, if this is the case where Windy gets 1st, Mikhail 2nd, and Kyokudo maybe in 3rd, we could be in a position where we're all tied up 3 ways, looking towards round 3.
Definitely interesting prospect to have. I think it would be, well, just in any way, it would be quite exciting to see a lot more mixing around. Of course, we're already at the halfway point after we're done with this race, but, you know, nevertheless, it's still quite exciting to see because these 3 have been battling for so many weeks now already, over casual races and now through the first round, of course, as well. And Kyokodo, we've known him to be quite a challenge to pretty much everyone that's faced him. But I think Windy and Mikael, they just don't want to be discouraged, and they're constantly just trying to improve. And it's really, really interesting to see just how they're constantly already improving again and again. And Kyokodo now putting in a lap, 46.392, but it's not actually enough to topple Windy from his throne.
2/10 off the pace then at this stage. Demand improves to a 47.4. That's only good enough then for big drift there from Windy coming out to the corner. It's only good enough for 5th place. Ivan has jumped up then into that 4th position right now. So that's going to be key. There is Mikael in the Mustang in 3rd position. Chris Pateri jumps up to 6th position on a 48.4. That's a great time for Chris, who has been knocking in and about the late pack here in terms of races we've seen so far this season. But to be up there in 6th position in the nice blue Ford Mustang, that is a really, really accomplished time.
Yeah, I think if he makes it around 6th to 8th place, I think that would be a very solid qualifying from him. Of course, he's one of the newer guys. You know, we didn't see as much from him as we did from Windy, Kyokodo, and all the others, of course. But, you know, he's slowly been getting more and more into the groove. It's really fun to see how he's just getting more and more confident from week to week and how he's just gaining time. So it's really just nice to see a constant improvement from drivers like him.
Absolutely, and it's that constant improvement that becomes so vital, especially in these laps, as all these drivers will be thinking about, okay, well, how much do I put in for, say, this stint? How quick do I think I can go? And then there's the reality of how quick I can actually go, which is where I think we're going to be seeing that one happen late in the session. Because we are in evening conditions, though, this brings a whole different dynamic into play, and that is that the longer that this qualifying session goes on here, Nicholas, the colder this track is going to get, the quicker this track is going to get.
Yeah, that definitely is true. I think there's this very fine margin between a track that's too cold and too warm. But of course, at Monza, when you're constantly going at such high speeds, it doesn't really have too much tire wear because you just don't have these extreme loading zones other than the Lesmos and, of course, Ascari and Parabolica. But compared to the time that you're actually spending on track, that is relatively short. The thing that really brings up the tire wear here is if you just start overheating the tires, and with so much high speed, you just never really get a chance to cool them down. In night, however, you have a cooler track, you have cooler tire temperatures, and I think some of the drivers will really use this to their advantage to get along more with these cooler temperatures. And I think especially Windy, for example, you know, who's now taking the fight to Kyokodo more aggressively, I think he's really getting along with it more and more now as you just let him through and has his little penalty there. Probably going to get reset, and I think he's just going to try and either try to go for a pit stop, or he's just going to try and maybe have a little lapping attempt just behind Kyokodo and look if the dirty air is not going to affect him as much.
This is not a championship for nothing, of course. There are prizes available, which are provided by HyperX, the title sponsor here of this endurance series on Gran Turismo Sport, as Kyokodo will be searching for more times. The bright red rims, I think, are going to be seen all day and pretty much into the night long here in terms of the racing that's going to be happening. But Kyokodo, for the time being, is going to send it on into the pits, followed by Windy as well here at just before the halfway stage. There are the tyre changes out in the way. Shalinu finding a bit more pace, and that's good enough to jump ahead of Chris Pateri up into 6th position then in this one. So Shalinu doing a pretty good job of things right now. Found 7/10 on that last lap and has put himself within 0.3 of a second now of Daman in 5th place.
Yeah, I think we'll have quite a few groups actually, you know, battling again. We had this same phenomenon in the last race where we had just a couple smaller groups battling throughout the field, and I think we'll have the same bit here again. I think Chris Pateri, he's going to be looking at either fighting for the guys behind him, you know, fighting for his 7th place right now, or maybe he's going to try and just hang into the slipstream, keep up with those guys in front of him. And I think if he's successful in that, he can look at a very solid race result here today.
And it's those solid race results which become so very, very key to build up, especially in a short championship like this. all those results are so important so quickly. Just noticed going up into 8th place, actually, there is Mr. Colin. I'm curious to see what Mr. Colin is driving today. That is also a V12 Vantage, and it's surprising to see Mr. Colin in a V12 Vantage because he has been a proprietor of the Porsche for a very, very long time. So to see that change, going over to something, maybe just having to go over to something, knowing that it's brute speed that's going to be the key to staying in this race today, I think that's going to be very telling. This is a case where the balance of performance has been decided on who's got enough grunt.
Yeah, and it definitely is the case that, the Aston Martin, whether older spec maybe is a bit of an advantage in comparison, because we see the Corvette, the C7, while it's a Group 3 car, so it's not exactly the Callaway Corvette GT3 that we know, for example, from the ADAC GT Masters, but it's still, designed as a mix between that Callaway Corvette and the GTE Corvette, and of course the C7 is a far newer car than the old V12 Vantage, I think at least 2 or 3 years, if you go down back to through history. So I think maybe it's the best idea to go for an older spec car here. Of course, less downforce is also less drag sometimes.
So we'll see how that comes into play. Windy in control, 3 different manufacturers inside the top 3, and it is the same faces up there at the top. Windy, Kyoto, Mikhail then just serving some slowdown penalty and dropping in behind Windy. Now that's tactical. Of course, we know that Windy's got the quickest time, but it's also worth knowing that none of the main rivals have got their quick time by drafting in behind their main rivals. So this could be a case where we see it. Kenneth jumping up a little bit in terms of time to a 53.5. That will be a good improvement, but that's why Ascari is the biggest place you do not want to make mistakes at. 3 seconds if you get it wrong.
Yeah, and that definitely didn't work to Mikhail's tactics there. 3 seconds, quite an extreme penalty. I'm not sure if they're going to have the same, integrity of penalties. So the same, duration of them as here, because 3 seconds, that's, well, needless to say, worlds in racing terms. Of course, when you're just thinking of normally waiting for something, just standing in front of a microwave waiting 3 seconds, that's just very, very short. But in the same class on a racetrack, that is absolute dimensions apart, and 3 seconds, that's quite some time that you have to deliver that penalty without significantly slowing down.
If you ever wanted to understand why time is relative, there was your example. Windy trying to chase down Mikhail here out on track, but it's all about chasing down the lap time. They say that the stopwatch never lies, and here this might be a case where the stopwatch is the deciding factor as they go through the Della Roggia and towards the 2 Lesmo right-handers here out on track. Some would say the only corners out on track, barring the Parabolica, that are not chicanes around this place. Windy looking to attack here, the second at the Lesmo corners. A lot more open the corner is, but pushing wide on the exit there is always going to be a tall prospect to try and gather the car back in before the rise down, before the drop down, and then the rise back up again, heading towards Ascari. And this has been where Windy's had a couple of struggles here, getting a little too cute on track with the first of the curves, and doing a nice job this time to really try and work this out. 5 minutes 45 seconds remaining then on the qualifying clock to find some time, and now it's about Parabolica. How can you open up this corner, get the power down as early as possible? There's the 2018 spec, the 2019 spec anti-cut curb on the outside, which Alexander Peroni found out that it's not a good idea to have. Windy's going to dive down into the pits then and make a stop. Mikhail does not improve on time. Now, Chris Pateri here out there on softs, and there's slowdown for Kyoto, who will dive down into the pits. Ivan staying out then, going for another lap as this one goes on. Demand also diving into the pits. Ivan only 1 second here off of the pace. That's still really good.
Yeah, it definitely is. And when you just overall consider how close they always are on the starts, normally around Monza, I think if I recall correctly, it was around 7-8 tenths, and you could gain quite a bit in the slipstream here, coming to the first corner. I think Ivan, if he plays his cards well through the first and second corner, if he stays in this position, he can keep up with the others to maybe even launch an attack into Della Roggia at the start. But of course, that's all relative. You have to make it through this first chicane, that very, very tight first chicane, without a mistake. And I think Daman and Cellino and Chris Pitteri as well, they want to have a little bit of a word about that. And that is just the thing about Monza. The straight is just so enormously long that the starting position, you know, it doesn't quite impact it so hard as, for example, Spa, where the rolling start just gets started by the game when some drivers are still in that bus stop chicane.
And that's going to be something worth keeping in mind as they go through. That rolling start is going to elongate the field. You normally talk about turn number 1 and 2 as being a huge bottleneck for major multi-car incidents, especially at the opening laps. And many a sim race I saw earlier on this year, of course, the V8 supercars decided that they wanted to have a good run around Monza, and it ended up in a crash fest through the first 3 corners to the point where it pretty much should have been a red flag for them as they went on through. Cellino jumps up a little bit with time, a 1:47 flat, immediately beaten by Ivan, who goes back into 4th position by just a 1/10 of a second and 4 thousandths. Windy gets a great draft though into turn number 1, doing exactly what was needed, but there was a little bit of not too much help, having one of those anti-cut bollards there just fall out onto the circuit right on the racing line. Incredibly distracting.
Yeah, definitely, but I think right now it's really just a fortunate situation for Windy. He was perfectly in the right place at the right time, 4 tenths up. Look at this time gain from drafting. And of course, probably a lighter car as well, right on the edge for Della Roggia's exit. And now comes in to Lesmo. Very nice and clean line once again. Are we going to see another big improvement? Are we going to see an improvement like Kyokudo put on last week just to absolutely assert his dominance in qualifying? But at the moment it seems, you know, last week was quite a shout. I think this time he's a bit too much out of air to shout.
Well, it's going to be close no matter what happens. So we'll see how this goes. It's up by half a second in the middle sector from Windy. This is a fantastic lap. And the best bit is there's more draft to come, because there is Chris Pitteri in front, who will be dragging Windy along the entire way of the run to the Parabolica corner. This is exactly what Windy wanted. A little bit of traffic that knew how to play, just playing about with it the way that he knew he needed to. And this could be a case of jumping up ahead of who needs it. Crossing the line then with a minute 42. It's a 45.4 that puts him nearly an entire second in front of the rest of the pack.
Absolutely incredible. Just completely screamed from the top of his lungs there. But Kyokudo with the big reply immediately. Of course, not quite able to beat it, but still, just how can you argue with that? He's very desperate to show that he is not out of the game. And Mikael, now in the late stages, maybe looking for another run. So, yeah, I just don't think that you can really argue with those results. But now Mikael, he's quite far away time-wise from the top 2. And now in, well, comfortable range to Ivan and Cellino.
Comfortable range, but the key here is that Mikael is a full second off of Windy, who is at the front, 8 tenths behind Kyokudo. The outright pace as the flames spit aren't there. Windy jumps up ahead of Mr. Collin now into 8th place on a 48.4, so that one does help out in terms of time. 1.3 behind Daman in 6th place out there right now, but there are 30 seconds remaining. Every driver who is out there right now will have to get themselves over the line now. They want one more run. They're off in the gravel, I believe, is going to be one of the other Mustangs out there on track today. So that one definitely not good at all. But now on the brakes, left, right, left comes up. I think Windy's not going to get another lap in here. 5 seconds remaining on the clock. Is there any more improvement? The time expires. They are allowed to finish the laps that they have available to them today. They must do so within those 2 minutes. But Windy making progress over to the line, does not find improvement there on that lap. Kyokudo didn't have much and will not find the improvement, so will not be on pole position then for this one. Does Mika have anything? It's been a patient lap. The man goes 6th still with a little improvement. There is Mika, 146.4, and it stays in 3rd place. Minuscule improvements there. No improvements for Ivan over the line, so he remains in 4th place. But it is the Lamborghini Challenge winner who is on pole position, Nicholas, and that, I think the right way to say it, it's not necessarily an upset, but it is a little surprising.
Yeah, it definitely is. We all know Windy, he's quite confident in his abilities, I would say, because the overtakes he did sometimes, quite ballsy, others would say, but, you can see a certain confidence in his driving style when he's within this comfort zone. And I think, Monza really is, like, the entire track is one of his comfort zones, I would say. And I think he's very happy to show, that he is confident in Monza, because when you show confidence, of course, it's a bit more intimidating than you're being shown confidence by other drivers, and you can't really reply with that.
And we saw how it was 1 week ago that Kyokudo had a bit of a challenge in the early stages, but used strategy to mastermind a way forward to a 10-second victory. It was at the time before he had to pit in late. Is this going to be a case where maybe it might be done on strategy once again?
I think it could definitely be a case where it's done on strategy again. Kyokudo is, of course, one of the guys who's very, very good on tires. When everyone else was basically on soft tires at the start last time around, he was on super softs and made them last longer, which, of course, had a psychological effect as well on his competition if they saw that happen. And I think maybe we're going to have pretty much the same strategy again, not go as long as your fuel allows it, but instead go, until the tires allow it. And that's going to be, I think, a deciding factor here to make the tires last long without losing a lot of time.
Well, here are the drivers lining up then on the grid. It's a 90-minute race, so this is not a sprint. This is more of a marathon, and there is Windy in control of everything right now. There is the low-down Corvette in 2nd position, able to be a little bit more streaked and streamlined here through this one. It's a battle of Britain versus America here at Monza, and it starts now for 90 minutes worth of action. Then with Windy Boy at the front, 6/10 only the margin, and already you can see how that is going to close as they take the big narrow inside line, starting to move to the outside here before they jam on the brakes into the Rettifilo for the very first time. This one, no real troubles at all for Windy starting, but the man and Shalini already trying to jostle it out for places side by side. Mr. Colin will take away 9th place away from Kenneth then at the back of the pack, but Windy crucially clear, but not for the time being. The Della Roggia coming up as the next big bastion that could be a place where overtakes happen. Kyokudo thinking about it, but has to tuck into line.
That was very close. You could really see how the Corvette, the suspension of the Corvette, compressed at the front, where how hard he had to go on the brakes to make that work. And yeah, a lot of people already fighting quite hard here, so not that many people thinking, maybe we're gonna tuck in a bit first. And Windy pushing quite hard. I think that killed his momentum quite a bit. And well, 4/10, of course, it's still a bit more comfortable than 2/10, but those 2/10 can be reached quite quickly with all this slipstream going on here.
Absolutely. Through Ascari, where Windy has struggled a little bit so far in practice, and the rest of it, there is the man, and that in front is Shalinu, who had got half a second's worth of penalty at the Della Roggia, now down to just 2/10 of a second then on the opening lap. They have all the time in the world to serve it, but here's the battle for the race lead. Kyokudo wasn't going to be away from that position for long. Windy's going to try and tuck this one up and under Kyokudo, and that's fantastic then to regain the lead. But of course, you're not going to get that sort of advantage then when you go towards turn number 1. The Corvette C7 against Windy, who is there in the V12 Vantage as they rush towards that turn number 1 and 2 once again. There is Kenneth around for a little bit of an oopsie daisy. We'll catch this on replay then from back of the pack through Parabolica. This is where it all went wrong. Just straight on, just outbroke himself.
Yeah, some people just get a little bit too desperate
no.
on trying to catch back up. Oh, what happened to Windy Boy?
Let's have a look. There's Kyokudo down the inside as they go towards turn 1, and Windy has played the James Dean game of chicken, and due to the Gran Turismo Sport system, you are not going to be able to cut that section too much. You will get automatically reset on the racing line because you've missed the gate checkpoints that are made by the system, and as such, Windy is now down to 6th, and Kyokudo has done exactly what he needed to do here today, right now, you'd say, Nicholas, and create the error.
Yeah, it seems that in that regard, Kyokudo is just still more experienced, so to say, than Windy, and Windy still has a bit to learn there, how to handle the pressure there, because this is not the first time we see it, of course, and Windy just so desperate to hold on to his position, and well, a bit too desperate, a bit too aggressive on the brakes, but of course now he'll try to make his way back through the ranks, up to the man now, right on his back, and I think he's maybe going to do a move down the inside here. Yeah, he pulls alongside now for Parabolica, makes it to the inside, late on the brakes, but not quite as late as the man, so I think he's going to try it into the first chicane instead.
Well, he is the man after all. It's very tough to get past the man at any stage in time, and Windy's trying to do so, unlocking the inside, doesn't quite get there, has to tuck back in again here, looking for the run, almost bump drafting here down the front stretch here as they go towards the Rettifilo again. Don't make the same mistake twice here, Windy. On the brake, slow it down, gets the inside curb nicely and picks up the place, moves up into 5th. The crucial fact about that mistake, though, here, Nicholas, is that there's about 1 hour and 25 minutes worth of time to go out there and correct that mistake. It would be a lot more different if that had 3 minutes only to correct that mistake.
Yeah, definitely. The advantage of having such a mistake at the start, of course, is, well, as I said, it's at the start, so you have plenty of race to still go. But of course, the disadvantage as well is, you're still about as close to the leader as you can be. But we're talking about Kyokudo here. The guy barely makes any mistakes, and it's going to be quite difficult, I think. Chris Bateri, meanwhile, he's really nicely and snugly fit into his 7th place. Quite comfortable gap to the guys behind, so he's looking for a very good result for him at the moment.
Windy there, of course, in 8th position, and Mr. Colin in 9th, all of whom are spread nice and neatly, a couple of seconds each between them as they rise up the hill towards Ascari. Now, Windy's got the next target in sight. This is Shalinu here in 4th position. Ivan currently on the podium right now as things stand, but Windy will be searching for the inside sooner rather than later here in terms of this battle, going through the famous Parabolica corner, trying to attack the exit as much as you can, and there you can see that very inconsistent line from Shalinu going through the final corner. And we did note a little earlier in terms of the season that Shalinu isn't one who races the most naturally compared to most sim racers out there. Windy's going to look to the inside once again, jam on those brakes, and it's a case of 2 from 2, absolutely.
Yeah, after this first escapade, I think, he's just trying to turn around his image of turn 1 by, well, turning around being successfully overtaken by Kyokudo into successfully overtaking everyone else through turn 1, as it seems. And next one up in that list would be Ivan, who of course still tries to keep up with Mikael in front.
He is trying to keep up. There is Ivan. He's 2 seconds behind Mikael Mursieka in 2nd position right now, so 2 seconds the gap, 1 second behind to Windy, and Ivan will definitely not want to give up a podium, but remember, this is an endurance event. This is, there's the mistake, running very wide, dipping it off into the gravel there. That's not going to help, and Mikael didn't have the best of runs either, so now here comes Windy down the outside to make this one happen and gets it done before they even reach the braking zone. And that is position 3 once again for Windy. Pressure now to chase down Mikael, who is 2.2 seconds down the road and is 3.2 seconds behind your race leader Kyokudo. Not out of the realms just yet, but it seems like that Mustang does not have as much compared to the other 2 vehicles, the Aston Martin and of course the Corvette here today.
Yeah, the Mustang doesn't quite have as much racing heritage in GT3 as the Aston Martin and the Corvette, of course. But nevertheless, I think it's still, for Monza, a very capable race car. And, maybe it's just about finding the rhythm, finding your center properly, and, maybe it goes a bit faster later in the stint, It's all dependent on how the car handles throughout the entire stint. As we've seen, quite a few massive pace drop-offs before, whereas other cars, they just didn't have that disadvantage as extremely.
This is Cellino in 5th position, tried to go down the inside at turn number 1. The Rettifilo did not manage that one, so to the Della Roggia, noses away to the inside. How good is this going to be on the brakes? Oh, it was very, very curt to the inside, so not much you can say from Cellino there. Almost a case of car placement, not wanting to deviate from the line, running into a couple of troubles there to get past Ivan, who effectively just said, well, if you want to go to the outside, I'll put you all the way out there, but I'm taking the racing line, so if you're going to go on the brakes, you're going to have to make sure you make a block pass.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Ivan, he's a quite, he has his moments when he makes a little mistake. Sometimes under pressure as well, but overall, as a defensive driver, he's one of the big numbers in the field. And we've seen that again and again throughout a lot of races. This might have been a bit wide there. Do we see the penalty pop up? I don't know. But yeah, he escapes that for now as well. And yeah, I think Cellino, of course, we've seen fight for top positions all the time as well. So I think it's all about Cellino trying to put on as much pressure as possible onto Ivan to make him crack in his usually solid defense.
Nearly a bump there from Cellino through the Parabolica and onto the front stretch once again, onto their 6th lap of this event, and Cellino's going to move to the inside again. Well, is this going to be a case of Groundhog Day potentially for Cellino? Really slowing it down, but again, trying to hold that inside line is Ivan. Little slide on the exit from Cellino, and then jumping back into position then is Ivan, who does not want to get aggressive here and really start battling early, mainly because look who's behind them. Demand, yes, 2.9 seconds of penalty, but that can be served down at any point in time. Ivan's going to wait for the right chance, which is going to be here. Nope, has to jump back into line as they all funnel on through the Della Roggia section, and you feel right now Ivan wanted to do something that Valentino Rossi, who is his big inspiration, does so very, very often, and that is attack again at the earliest available opportunity.
Well, they do say attack is the best defense, and Ivan certainly takes that to heart, He's constantly letting his opponents know that he's already there, and I think, the constant pressure that puts on people, that can really be the thing that makes the last crack that he needs to make that pass happen in the end. Windy, though, he's also gaining quite a lot of time. Not so much right now because he just ran a little bit wide through turn 10, the last bit of Ascari, but he's been gaining solid time again and again, and I don't think that he's actually losing time in comparison to Kyokodo up front, which might be that we're in for a race-long chase.
It could be a race-long chase. The gap is 6 seconds at the front, first to third, and there is Windy right now as we focus on this perspective. You can see a 1:48 flat last time by was 1.6 seconds off of the fastest lap that he has been able to do. You can see that on the right-hand side, but what you can also see is what they have available to them. Here's the battle, 4th and 5th again. Ivan is back through into 4th position, and that is striking whilst the iron is hot, but if you're going to slide wide like that, going through the Retfilo corner, expect to be attacked through Curva Grande, but Cellino, oh my word, look at the penalty. He's got 6 seconds worth of it.
Yeah, I gotta catch them all. He's collecting quite a few, and I think that's also mostly due to the curbs that are around here, because normally you can't tackle sausage curbs all too much here, but they're a bit more flat here, so it's quite encouraging to just go for this, bump over the corner. Sometimes it even helps you turn in a little bit, and I think Cellino is a little bit too enthusiastic about that right now. But now just sitting behind Ivan, if he chooses to not just immediately make the next move, just sit behind him a little bit, he can just let himself get dragged up to Ivan through slipstream and then just ease off a little bit more because that will, of course, also wear down this penalty quicker.
Well, you can see a couple tenths of a second lopped off, down to 5.9 seconds worth of penalty that is there. They have all of the race to serve that penalty, and if they do not serve it, it gets added on at the end of the race. So the incentive is there. You either lose that penalty on track or you lose it in the standings after the race. And we have seen it before over the course of racing with World Pro Racing that those penalty points, they do matter. They do make a difference. So what can you do to make something happen that gives you maybe the best opportunity to go out there and attack? There's two philosophies Shalinu could have here at this stage. One philosophy is get past Ivan and try and just hold him back for 5.8 seconds worth of time, or sit behind maybe and wait for 5.8 seconds as there's another lunge down the inside. That's incredibly aggressive on the curb. It's too aggressive, in fact. That's a reset then. Backwards goes Shalinu and has to put the power back down again to get on going again. Now here's the first taker as well, Mr. Colin, into the pits after what is 14 minutes worth of racing, which is incredibly early, I think, in terms of trying to get a stop working out. But now there is Shalinu in trouble off at Curva Grande. There's the replay. Got it all back off and going again. But then what's the dramas then going through Curva Grande? Is this a case of just running wide and maybe things going wrong? So we see it's straight, it's straighter, it's straight off.
Yeah, I think he's either he's a bit discouraged now and, just trying to find a center again, or maybe a bit distracted as well. And of course, after something like that happens, you just get reset out of a fight. And yeah, that is Shalinu just retiring the car, unfortunately. It's of course a frustrating experience. So sometimes, you just can't really recover from that.
And Shalinu out of the race then at that moment in time. We don't know what quite has happened there. It didn't look natural. Maybe some of the technical gremlins then running into the way that the racing was going, and as such, retirement is the name of the day. We are down to 9 drivers then here at this race for the HyperX Endurance Championship, and this is the fight for second place at the moment. Mikhail Mercieka against Windy Boy 97 as they hit the brakes into the Rettifilo for their 9th time here in this race, and looking to go out there and be aggressive in the early goings of the proceedings. Windy knows that he's let the gap slip from here to Kyoto, has to dispatch Mikhail quickly, but there is a silver lining at this moment, a slight gain you are able to find here in terms of speed being in that tow, that slipstream. It might just have to be a case that Windy has to play the cooperation game very, very much like NASCAR in order to try and bring back in Kyoto over the course of this race.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be the case. And if I didn't know any better, I think I'm starting to see a little bit of a pattern with the gaps here. So I think overall the Mustang has the absolute edge on straights. The Corvette has the absolute edge on corners. And I think the Aston Martin is just pretty much the perfect balance in between. Because you can see how the gap between Kyoto and Mikhail constantly goes down on straight lines, but as soon as corners come like Lesmo and Roger, instantly this gap starts to go up, shoot up by quite a lot. And I don't think that's Mikhail just driving slower. I think that's also just a little bit with the car, how the cars just interact differently with the circuit. And meanwhile, of course, Windy, if he's the perfect middle of that, can, of course, not gain as much in corners, which was the ability of Kyoto to just keep up very well with him. But on straights, he could be a bit better off. But meanwhile here, the absolute best on the straights, the Mustang, he's thinking better of it now. I think maybe he's just trying to hang with Windy now instead of going for another attack, because he knows it will cost them both a lot more time than any of them can gain right now. And that's Ivan with a mistake.
Ivan going around there at the Rettifilo. He just caught the back end of it then as he hit the brakes into the opening section of road. So there from 4th position, running into troubles, hits the brakes nicely, but it's through this second half. He gets all over the anti-cut curbs and effectively, desperately trying to slow it down. runs into a bit of troubles, now falls back behind the man into what is now 5th position here in this race. There's your leader, Kyokudo, out to a 6-second lead here at the front right now. Windy's done a brilliant job trying to chase down the margin, but what I was going to say was, at this point last time we were racing, and we were racing at the Nürburgring, almost everyone had come down in and made their stops on a 4-stop strategy. Today might be a little bit different. Maybe a 3-stop might be the easier place, because this place doesn't have many corners, so maybe you could say here, Nicholas, that they are going to be easier on the tyres today.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot easier on the tires than the Nürburgring, because in Nürburgring you have a lot of low mid-speed corners where you have to lean on the tire a lot more, and that just simply isn't the case here at Monza. However, the fuel usage, of course, will be a lot higher, and overall, from the strategy that we saw at Nürburgring, that might play into a lot of people's hands here, because Mikael and Kenneth, they're both pitting right now. The car is quite empty already. He's going for another set of super softs, I believe, because right now the super soft seems to be not just a durable tire, but also the fastest one by far.
Well, of course, it is super soft. It does also have the lowest tyre life out of any of the tyres, but I don't think that's the main factor that we'll be seeing today. Mikael back out in the way in 4th position. Ivan has, though, jumped onto the soft compound tyre. Now, I think that's a good decision for Ivan in terms of this race. We're struggling a little bit late on with the super soft, trying to slow it down and actually put the power down on the exit of the Rettifilo.
Yeah, and it's just generally one of the most difficult things to do, I think. As soon as the tires are properly worn down, these middle speed corners, these low speed corners, and of course braking zones as well. People just don't really expect how much tire life can make a difference into braking zones. You know, it gets a lot harder to just predict what the tire does. And of course, if you have a lockup as well, flat spots and all that just play into that as well. Meanwhile, though, we see Windy is actually keeping this gap constant, if not closing down quite a bit. So I think Windy might be a bit better off on his tires right now, because it's now gone down below 5.7 seconds, while it was still 6.1 seconds, I think, last lap.
This is going to be a close race here, you feel, over the course of 90 minutes, and Kyokudo's got to work, stays out for another lap, so a 12th revolution of the circuit is coming up, but Windy is going to come in 1 lap earlier, 6% of the tank remaining, deciding to make a stop. Now, this is another thing that's going to be key. If Windy's pushing a little bit harder, he's using more of that fuel tank. He's able to maybe pit in a little bit earlier. Maybe Kyokudo's trying to think about the long game. Think about, okay, every lap will add up and I might be in the best position. The man also into the lane, trying to make a stop, automated by the Gran Turismo Sport system.
Yeah, and man, this is really just one of the nice things. It takes a bit... It takes away one worry of racing, which is the pit stops, of course. You still have plenty of control over the pit stop. Well, more control anyway than a driver has in real life, but that is just normal in sim racing, of course. But I think Mikael, with his attempted undercut, actually got quite a bit closer to Windy. I think he was over 2 seconds away and gained at least half a second with that. So, of course, they have to make it as long as possible. I think this time around, actually, it will be more of a, fuel-oriented strategy race. But nevertheless, it will be important to keep those tires alive. And we just had news from Shelinu as well. He had apparently a server disconnection, which is just very unfortunate for him.
It's more unfortunate as well, knowing that if you do have a server disconnection, there is no way to get back in. You effectively spectate from that point on. If you're in, you're in, and if you're out, that's it. Now, Kyokudo surely has to dive down into the pits this time, and does so from the race lead. So, Ian, that's something really, really key to look at there from Kyokudo's strategy then. 9% of the tank going 1 lap longer. Kyokudo has got himself a bigger fuel tank than what the Aston Martin and also what the Mustang has. So economy might be what we're looking at today. Out and away will go Kyokudo, looking to put the power down and look behind where Windy is. trying to make progress here on the front stretch. The gap 7 seconds then, pretty much dropping down to about 6, 5.4, 5.2. So the advantage was there from Windy, did gain in the stops about 7/10 of a second, but that margin's going to keep adding up, especially if you can take less fuel at the end, and bang, 3.5 seconds. Goodbye any hopes now of chasing that all down.
Yeah, and the penalties here are quite harsh, simply because you can gain quite some time by cutting the corners here, but I think as long as Windy doesn't pay too much attention of it, as he is still so far behind Kyokodo, he should be still fine. And I think that we also get a couple of backmarkers now in the deal, because I think one car in front of Windy is not quite Kyokodo, that is another car.
Certainly is. There's a 10th of that already off the books then right now. It is Kenneth who is in 9th position right now, and this is going to have to be negotiated pretty quickly in terms of this race. So Kenneth, 2.5 seconds worth of penalty to serve anyway, going through the left of Ascari, and should be pulling over to the left-hand side once they all get through there, and they do so. Windy gets another 2/10 knocked off there quite nicely and picks that one up without any real dramas at all. So Windy's doing exactly what is needed to be done here. A little bit of traffic is a little bit of time to serve the penalty. You serve it in increments. A 10th here, a 10th there, it will be gone before you know it.
I think the best strategy for Windy right now would be, after his mistake there, he is catching back up quite rapidly at the moment. He's obviously comfortable with the car, and as soon as he gets behind Kyokodo, I think his best strategy would be just to hang back for a bit, relax. Obviously, Kyokodo has the fuel usage advantage right now, because the Corvette just seemingly uses less fuel. Honestly, not a big surprise, because of course it's a V8 instead of a massive V12 in that car. But nevertheless, you know, just hang back a bit, stay right behind Kyokodo, put some pressure on him, and try to make the car last as long as he does. And then in the last stint, when he isn't expecting it, just strike with all your might. And I think that way, Windy could make quite an impressive comeback in this race.
There is Deman in 5th position, 1.3 seconds behind Ivan, who is in 4th right now. But with 3.8 seconds worth of penalty, that's going to be a long, long serve for Deman. And now it gets even worse, because another 2 seconds jump up. It's 5.8 seconds now. And there's yellow flags coming into the sector that they're going into right now. And that's for Kenneth, who's in the inside wall backwards there the very same way that Lewis Hamilton did in, I think, 2011, if memory serves correct. Maybe 2010. So Kenneth going for a bit of a round you go.
Yeah, and the Lesmos, they are definitely one of the harder corners of the track, because Parabolica, now you have a bit of runoff. Of course, you have this curb that just tries to launch you like a Saturn V rocket. But other than that, you still have a bit of runoff. So, and just besides that, you still have not so much of a chance to spin to the inside into the wall. But Lesmo, they're just so close to normal 90-degree corners. You're thinking you can go into that with all of your confidence, but that isn't the case. That definitely isn't the case, because these corners are just absolutely tricky to get down 100%. Meanwhile, you have Chris Pateri and Mr. Colin fighting it out for 6th place. Mr. Colin with a very consistent drive so far, making it back up to the rear of Chris Pateri. Of course, 1.9 seconds penalty, but he has plenty of time to serve that as he heads into the pit lane.
Second time then that Mr. Colin has come into the lane. He has been one of the more aggressive. Chris Pateri has also dived down into the lane as well, but Mr. Colin here going for the early call. So this is going to be a 5-stop then from Mr. Colin. At this rate of stopping, out and away goes Mr. Colin, crucially ahead of Chris Pateri. Only 70% of the tank is up to fill for Mr. Colin. There's a whole tank for Chris Pateri on the soft compound tyre. So that will put Chris back into 8th position right now, and will be looking to try and gain as much as possible here in terms of the stint at this moment in time. There is Ivan, 0.0 of penalty to go and serve. So literally it is a blink of an eye at this moment in time. But crucially, the man is right there, just sitting, waiting, looking for a chance to pounce here after maybe the first third of the race has come and gone just like that.
Yeah, I think the man, he definitely has a bit more of an exciting race today, and definitely Ivan, because as I recall, if I recall correctly, Ivan had a bit of a boring race in the void at Nürburgring. He basically was in a very solid position, but just no one else around him. So I think he'll appreciate the change of scenery with the Aston Martin lighting up his rearview mirror currently.
And of course, that Aston Martin will be wanting to try and make some good progress here. It is Aston against Aston, and there's a little bit of a change then on the front stretch. Ivan going to the left-hand side and looking to try and stay really, really narrow as possible. It is worth noting here that they haven't really dropped too much time in the opening section of this race. They are only still 16 seconds behind your race leader, Kyoto, right now, and only 8 seconds off the back of Mika, which I think for a race like this, that would be a huge win for these drivers.
Yeah, definitely, definite improvement compared to the gaps that we had last time, especially since they're still in spin range. So, to clarify, I don't mean that they are still in range to spin someone out or something, but if Kyoto would, for example, make a mistake like a 180-degree spin, which of course no one wants to happen to anyone, because, you know, we just want people to fight out to their limit, just completely on the same footing. But if he were to spin, he would still be within striking range then for Ivan, for the man, and the man now making it past Ivan, and I think something might have happened there.
Yeah, and that will certainly be key. And there is Ivan slow, going out to the second Lesmo corner. Oh, there it goes. Bang, into the wall hard. Coming out of the second Lesmo corner, easy to do. You want to be on the power early, but just like, and that, there goes the rear. Crucially though, there is a big gap, a 30-second gap to the next group. The man though, 10 seconds clear, 5 seconds worth of penalty.
Yeah, I think he has quite more than 5 seconds of a gap now, but of course, yeah, he will still try to catch to the front a bit more. Yeah, once again, Lesmo catching it out. You can almost basically predict it like Cluedo. It was insert driver name with the AstroTurf on the outside at Lesmo 1. And that is how the murder happened. And, well, very unfortunate to get caught out like that.
For the Americans, that's just clue. They don't have a do on the end. But for Windy right now, 2.5 seconds worth of penalty. He's still trying to chase down. The gap has stayed pretty stagnant over the course of this stint. It's at 4.3 to 4.2 seconds consistently over the laps, and this is a case of even keel driving right now. You see the penalty that will be on your screen for a lot of the time, so that's going to be a bit of a worry. Now Ivan has come down in again and got some fuel and back out and away again. Now this is a key thing, because I think Ivan would have got a lot of damage after that big hit, would have been compromised in a straight line, and as such needed to serve that pit stop now and convert the strategy.
Yeah, you of course don't want to pit too far off strategy, but when a hit like this happens, within a couple of seconds, preferably instead of a couple of laps, you have to decide, is this damage going to affect my lap time so drastically that it would be just better to pit right now? And Ivan definitely seems to have the conclusion that pitting right now was the right option, and honestly, I can't really blame him there, because there was quite a hefty hit just straight into that barrier. And of course, if you need anything at Monza, with the little downforce you have, you need your front downforce.
Absolutely, and what's crucial as well in terms of the race is now that on strategy, Ivan finds himself now behind Mr. Colin in this race, who is net 5th in this one outright right now. So Mr. Colin has very quietly run a good race. 2.4 seconds the penalty that needs to be served right now, and is doing just the quiet race. And sometimes the quiet race is the best race to have, because you don't have cameras, you don't have pressure, you don't have anything really to worry about. Mr. Colin is driving the quiet race, and he's driving it to a T.
Yeah, definitely, and I think just staying calm, staying quiet. Of course, for our spectators, of course, it'll be a bit weird not seeing a single car throughout the entire race. But you know, that single car might have just a perfect race going on. You know, no battles, nothing to hold him up, and sometimes that is really what you just need to wind down a little bit, to stay focused, and to just find the perfect level of concentration to just go fast and have a solid result in the end.
Speaking of perfect levels of concentration, the gap's opened up again. It's 4.8 seconds now for Kyokudo at the front, who is really starting to like things. Why is it at 4.8 seconds? Well, you can see that 0.4 of a second of penalty has been served by Windy Boy 97. The gap down in terms of penalty is 2.1 seconds, so this is quietly being whittled and worked on at this stage. And Kyokudo will be feeling like, okay, this could work. This could be the way that strategy plays into my hands for this one. They are over 1/3 distance. They will be due a pit stop in about the next 5 laps or so, or within that range. And crucially, these two are breaking away from Mikael, who is in 3rd place right now, almost 11 seconds off of the pace overall. But crucially, Mikael is able to gain on the straight. The Mustang is the quickest in a straight line, but of course, you have to remember that Mustang is not as powerful compared to the Corvette on the brakes, and that will be down to weight factor in this one. That Corvette is made of plastic at the back. It's very, very light.
Yeah, definitely the case, but what I think is really the case here that Mikael might have miscalculated a little bit. Of course, you want a strong car on the straights at Monza, but maybe, just a bit too much emphasis onto the strong on straights. Maybe even something like the Nissan would have been a good choice here. But then again, they have done their testing, and of course, it also depends on how people prefer their cars to drive. So if you feel, uncertain, but you can go a bit faster, but more uncertain in the car, not as much security. In the Aston Martin, for example, for Mikael, it's of course safer for him to go a little bit slower per lap in the Mustang, and instead go consistent, to secure that 3rd place here and then bet on the next race for him.
There is Chris Spiteri in 7th position, a whole lap ahead of Kenneth in 9th place here in this race right now, with 55 minutes remaining on the clock right now in this one. And you'd feel at this stage that it's a case of all about finding momentum. We saw how at the Nürburgring the last 30 minutes or so, it came down to almost processional for those in the mid to late pack, because they knew that they had pulled out a margin to who they needed to, and Chris here is in a very similar position. He's 4 seconds behind Ivan at this moment in time, but crucially is 11 seconds clear of Ilwindi, who is in 8th position, who's having an even lonelier race right now. Kyokudo sees the gap cool down a little bit though to 4.5 seconds. The gaps ebb and they flow, and it's key as well because Windy has caught that gap down to 4.5, whilst also just incrementally taking the penalty down to 1.8 seconds. This is a really tough scrap, and if Windy has another good stop, oh no, it's gone back up again. He's caught the Della Roggia a little bit too aggressively and has just chalked on another 2 seconds to now to take down again. He's back to where he started about 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, definitely something not to be meddled with, and that of course distracts, as we saw here, and that's a lot of time lost. Very unfortunate for him. And yeah, in my personal opinion, maybe a little bit too harsh for these with these corner cutting penalties, because it's not like you gain 3 seconds through just taking one curb a bit more aggressively than others.
Well, I think it's more than just trying to serve it, and there goes another 0.6 of a second onto the penalty, so it's now up to 4 seconds exactly. And remember as well, Windy got into a little bit of penalty trouble at the back end of the Nürburgring race, where he was up to 8 seconds worth of penalty. It's been a little bit of a sticking point where we haven't seen it so far, but it might just be the one weakness in Windy's game, trying to push the track limits a little bit too far on what is a game like Gran Turismo Sport, which is not very liberal when it comes to penalties. In comes Mikael to make a stop then with just 7% of the tank remaining. There's the crews working incredibly hard, trying to make sure the tyres are done, then the fuel. That is how it works in the GT3 category. They can't fill them up simultaneously due to the regulations. So now it's a case of, well, what do you have to get on going? There are other questions as well that maybe can be asked here, as that is Mikael changing to the soft compound tyre and almost filling the car up to full fuel, I think is the right way to say it. Now, this could be a completely different change of tact here in this race. Now, if you're going onto that soft compound, maybe it might be worth here in the late stages going onto the soft or even the medium compound, losing time over the course of a stint, but maybe not taking tyres when it comes to the stop and only taking fuel?
It could definitely be a valid strategy here. To the mediums, I kind of doubt it because, you know, the colder it gets, of course, the more it's worth it to run the softer tires because they just don't heat up as much. But the soft tires, I think, with the heat degradation and just generally how they will behave, if they can deliver solid amounts of pace while these conditions are changing, I think it's definitely worth attempting to double stint or maybe, like, if it's running especially well, even triple stint soft tires and then just refuel, because of course you save quite a bit of time in pit stops with that.
There is Kyokudo, 5.5 seconds clear at the front of the field. Has just lapped Kenneth for the second time and is doing pretty okay. Into the pits then comes Windy Boy 97 from second position. There are the tyres. That's the fuel then going into the car. And where will Windy come out in comparison? There is the man in third position on the road right now, and will also be diving down into the lane to make the stop. 2% of the tank for both of them, out and away with 89% of the tank. Windy is there still in second position, so that is a good stop by strategy, by numbers, and it's a long fuel stop as well for the man, who will be looking to get out and away shortly after the second stop that was available to them. This is going to be a 4-stop race at this stage, 90% of the tank down to 89%, and away you go with that one. There is Mikhail in third position right now, 8.5 seconds away from what is needed at this moment.
I'm just wondering right now how Kyokudo will reply to this strategy call, because of course he's now not quite as comfortably far away anymore, especially since we've seen that Windy can quite easily close gaps, and I think that's not a penalty again. Jesus, he's really dancing on the edge of the blade here with these track cut limits, as we've seen them being quite harsh so far. But I'm wondering if he's going to go in this lap or maybe next lap, if he's trying to go for the longest fuel stints possible. But judging from that line, he might go in this lap? No, he stays out. So I think he's just trying to go down as much as possible on his fuel, just trying to stay out as long as possible and just broaden his gap through that way.
Remember that Kyokudo had an extra lap to play with as well. The penalty up now to 5.4 seconds now for Windy Boy. This is not working out at all here in this race for him, and it is penalty trouble that is the call of the day. Now, 5.4 seconds at the moment is fine, but if he picks up another one of those 3-second penalties like he did earlier on, then he could be looking at Mikhail, who's 8.7 back, in a little bit of issues. Now, here's Ivan fighting for 5th place with Mr. Colin, who's got 4 seconds worth of penalty. And I think if you're wise here, if you're Mr. Colin, you let the quicker driver go here. But Mr. Colin wants a battle here on the inside. Lifts off, though, for the corner. And crucially, that's a good lift as well. Not only does he seek the place without losing too much time, half a second's worth of penalty. That comes off the board.
Yeah, and also adapts to this moment. Dives straight into the pit lane on 0 fuel, so just barely making it in there, running on fumes, so to say. And yeah, that was actually perfect timing, I would say.
Absolutely perfect then. Mr. Colin will be looking to get out and away shortly. There is Windy, who will be racing against and also diving into the pits then with 3% of the tank. Mr. Colin will get out and away, and Kenneth then shouldn't have too much to worry about. Is 3 minutes 46 off the lead, 2 laps down, and is a lap behind here with Windy at this stage. Kyokudo due to come down in and make a stop. Does have another lap in the tank if available, so we'll see now. This is a dive into the pits then. So Kyokudo comes in with 2% of the tank left, so didn't have another lap available to it. There's the red rim tyres going on, and now the fuel here for the Corvette. It was worth keeping an eye out then on that last stop, because Windy Boy took in 6/10 and has had 2 laps of undercut to really play with over the course of this one. So now, how is this one going to play in terms of get out and away? There goes Kyokudo now, and the gap looks very similar to what it was. There you can see in the distance where Windy Boy is. Kyokudo will now have the advantage of fresh tyres by a couple more laps, and the gap once again will claw down under 4.5 seconds.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if it's going to be, well, how do you say it best? I'm not quite sure how they're playing their strategy right now, because I think Kyokudo could have quite filled up these last 10% more. So, of course, he would have been stationary for a little bit longer, but I think he would have come out right behind Windy, so he could have played this long game even longer. Of course, his tires are now a bit newer, but yeah, difficult to say. I think it's really difficult to say. Maybe this is for him the optimum range where he can still push on the tires without losing too much time while running these longer stints.
And crucially as well, that was the second stop. Chris Pateri is in for a third stop then here in this race. So that's something really interesting. Those at the back are having to make extra stops then, and we are looking towards the halfway stage of this race in the next minute and a half. So Kyokudo is just short then of a 4-stop strategy. It looks like it's going to be 5 stops here from most drivers in this field. And in terms of splashes and dashes, Kyokudo's in the best possible position for splashes and dashes.
Yeah, that is definitely the case, and I think that is exactly what he's aiming for as well. Two stops so far. I think he might actually just have to get in for a short little splash and dash for 20% fuel maybe at the end of the race, and I think that might be actually his this big master plan to keep Windy behind him. Meanwhile,
or he just uses those extra 10% of fuel that he hasn't been putting in the stops.
That could also be, of course, that could also be the case. Or maybe also just depend on Windy catching him and then try to, because he has this 4-second gap, it's not quite where, I almost said DRS on a GT3 car, yes. I have had a very long day mentally, apparently. But slipstream, that is the word. Slipstream doesn't quite kick in until around maybe a second. That's where it starts to kick in. So until then, he can still run on a lower fuel mix, for example. So a lot of different opportunities he has here right now, but I think maybe he has to start pushing again because Windy has just closed down 8/10 since the start of the lap, going into the second Lesmo, and that is quite a lot of time to be gained.
I think you were looking for F, and that is an F3 that would have DRS, not necessarily a GT3 with this scenario. But Kyokudo down a second over this lap. This has not been the best lap in the world. Trying to gather it all back up again as quickly as possible, but at this stage has done well through Ascari, has got another couple of tenths of a second. Doesn't need to worry too much about that gap right now, knowing that Windy's got to serve penalty and that there is traffic in front. This is still Kyokudo's race at this stage by a lot more than what is seen out there on track at the moment. They will have to get by Kenneth in the not too distant future, but of course there is so much left to go on. This race has so much left available to it, but we're going to step aside very briefly here with World Pro Racing. We'll be back with more of the action from the HyperX Endurance Series after these messages. This event is brought to you by World Pro Racing, the Malta Motorsport Federation, GMR Entertainment, WJ England & Son, Melita, Media Looks, Restream.io, Gaming Malta, VisitMalta.com, and TVM Sport. This stream is powered by Melita, using Melita Gigapower Internet. World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real.
For only €5 a month, experience every high-definition moment on your TV, tablet, phone or PC. Great teams, great moments, and so much more. TSN from Melita is your ticket to stay in the game. Visit melita.com/sports.
Senna was a god. No one could even dream to follow him.
I'm from a very humble background.
The role of women at that time were really difficult.
It's just so dangerous. You are risking not only your life, but also my life.
Wish your Wi-Fi network would just work in any room? Our new Stellar Wi-Fi is AI assisted to give you the smoothest, fastest possible Wi-Fi throughout your home. Stellar Wi-Fi, assisted by AI, exclusive to Melita. Find out more in-store or online.
World Pro Racing, where sim racing becomes real. The chase continues here at Monza. Kyoto Sentai in control of this race by 3.7 seconds over Windy Boy 97. A mistake on lap 2 sent Windy Boy from first to second all the way down to 6th place and trying to chase down. He's also trying to chase while serving penalty. He's got 3 seconds now left to serve, and he's been doing a great job into Ascari on taking that penalty down, but he has just been knocking up penalties at a couple of a second or 2 seconds at a time consistently over this one. So the penalty has been struggling. With every penalty point that gets knocked down, it makes life easier for Windy to try and chase. But we are also looking at the fuel numbers today, because it might be a case that the Corvette that is being run by Kyokudo is in a better position to where the Aston Martin V8 V12 Vantage is in comparison to Windy Boy 97. There is third position. This is Mikhail at this stage, 17 seconds off of the nearest competitor in the brilliant Mustang, and diving down into the pits then to take a stop. The soft tyre call has not worked out with a change of tyres there, so it seems like it is a resignation here, Nicholas, for Mikhail. This is third place and drop points.
Yeah, I think at the moment he's basically just focusing on getting third place home. As I said, it always depends on how well people get along with their car, of course. And he puts quite a lot of fuel actually in there. I think he actually might have been able to go one lap further, but just no confidence with the tires, perhaps. But yeah, that's a lot of relatives. Luckily, it's only one of 4 races, so maybe he's just hoping to attack again at full power next week.
Well, that's going to be worth keeping that in mind. We'll be counting down 7 days to go to Interlagos in 1 week's time. Going to Brazil is always a great thing to see. Mr. Colin is down in on the lane. There is Kyokudo at the front of the field, but Mr. Colin in from 6th place.
Yeah, and Mr. Colin is, well, quite by himself by now. Chris Pitteri was fighting with him for a little bit, but then chose to go on an alternate strategy, which evidently hasn't worked so well. But yeah, maybe it's also just a little bit of this offset that, you know, decides a couple of these, you know, just outside of the top 5 positions right there.
Remember, Mr. Colin is making more stops as Windy comes in then from what is going to be 2nd position right now. Should retain that 2nd position, but crucially has been undercutting his way back through the field, and he's had a really good stint this time, able to close down that 2nd and keep the gap at a 2nd. That's been the key. He's been able to manage the gap to Kyokudo on older tyres. Now look at the stint there, but 98% of the tank in. That's the most fuel he has put in at any stage of the time. The man also diving down into the lane. Windy Boy here is looking to try and make this go one more stint to get to the end.
Either that, because I think the gap went up a little bit again, because he was trying to save a bit of fuel. So far, we had 2 10-lap stints from him. This was now his first 11th lap stint, and yeah, I think that for the moment at least, he's trying to just go with a tiny bit different approach, and maybe just try to get around that final stop to match Kyokudo there.
Well, this is going to have to be a pretty big call from Windy here to try and mitigate the damage, just put more fuel in the car, so it is going to be a little bit heavier at this stage. It's going to have to try and lump all that fuel sloshing about there in the tank, so this is going to have to be well worked over the course of this one to make things happen. In comes Chris Pitteri then from 7th position on the soft compound, a couple of laps later from Mr. Colin, but remember, Mr. Colin is on a different strategy, and effectively they now level out here in terms of this one as they look to wait and get the fuel in and get on going again. There goes the Mustang and onto super soft tyres.
Yeah, last or second to last time pitting, and Kyokudo still stays out. What else can you say? Like, I think it's going to be, since Windy now ran this 11-lap stint, it's going to be a difference of 2 laps for the undercut. But either way, I think the gap will decrease, as we've seen so far again and again, by up down to around 27.0 if Windy nails this lap. And then, of course, we'll have the pit stop, unless Kyokudo has been fuel saving as well, which, to be honest, I kind of doubt at the moment.
Well, Kyokudo's really trying to work this stint then through the second Lesmo and trying to attack here in terms of this one. They'll have half an hour to go in a moment. Mr. Collins is in penalty troubles at the moment. He's got 7.7 seconds worth of them right now, which is an eye-watering amount in terms of this race. So I don't think we'll see those served before the end of the race, so they'll be added on in post. Now, here's another thing that hasn't really been thought about in terms of how this race is going to go here, Nicholas. It's how finishing works in timed races on Gran Turismo Sport, because once that timer expires and hits 0, it's not a case of you have say one more lap afterwards, or you go to start the final lap. It's a case of once you cross the line, that's it, your race is over once the clock hits 0.
Yeah, and especially for people who are in position fights a bit further down the line, or just, who just are very unfortunate that the opponent they are trying to chase down just hits the line just before the counter hits 0. Of course, that's a little bit of a disadvantage, but then again, it also makes for a nice extra method that people can gamble strategy on.
And of course, it's that strategy that's worth keeping in mind. There is Ivan in 5th position right now at the moment. 2 seconds worth of penalty, but crucially, only 7 seconds here behind Daman. So with work to do, Daman has 3 extra seconds worth of penalty. So that can be chased down here in this race. So the gap effectively out on track at this moment in time here, Nicholas, as we look at things right now, is about 3.9 seconds, not 6.9.
Yeah, and that is always the thing that you have to keep in mind. These penalties, they will be able to mess about with the final result quite a bit, unless, of course, you've served them. Of course, you're not thinking about it too much when you have a couple tenths or something, but when penalties go so high, as we had seen with, I think, Mr. Collin earlier, with 7.7 seconds, then you really have to start calculating, where will I finish, where will the others finish?
And Mr. Collin now goes 1 lap down to the race leader. Only momentarily, though. We've got Kyokudo due to come in to make a stop, and there is a bit more penalty being served by Mr. Collin, down to 5.2 seconds. And Kyokudo due in on the lane, takes the little beeline right and dives down in. We'll get tyres, we'll get fuel, and we'll now get an understanding of where Kyokudo is going to funnel out in all of this. There is Windy, but the penalty has increased again to 4.4 seconds, pushing too hard again to try and close the gap down. This has been the story of the race for Windy Boy. Again, another couple of seconds here, couple of seconds there. Out goes Kyokudo. There is the gap right now, closing on down, but crucially, that is a very, very even keel stop. I would say Kyokudo was quicker in that stop.
Yeah, I would say so. I didn't quite see the amount of fuel he put into the car, but we know that Windy essentially filled up the car completely. So it's gonna be, well, it's gonna be interesting to see if Windy can manage to close up to Kyokudo, save a bit of fuel, and actually make it to the end on this one. Or if they both have to go in for a splash and dash, of course, and then the fuel load there, the amount of refueling that has to be done, of course, takes more time as well. Who will be able to gain out from that last pit stop? Who will be able to, run this fast without using too much fuel?
Kyokudo has been so good at managing the gap over the course of this race. He's not done anything untoward. Windy has been the one who has been given the prerogative to push, and crucially has been making these small mistakes here and there, gaining up on the penalty points, which has not been the way that this race wanted to be done. Now it goes down to 4 seconds once again, and Windy's trying every which way to bring that gap down under 4 seconds, psychologically get that push going in, but it's just not quite working, I think, at this stage, and it might be a bridge too far, but that's something else to be seen. Of course, you've got to talk about as well how well the drivers have done up and down the field. We've only had one retirement out of the 10 drivers so far in this race, and that was a connection issue for Shalinu here in this one, who lost 4th place and effectively ran out of the event altogether. But what is also quite clear as well is that mid-pack scrap for the championship between Daman and Ivan as well, that one's not going to go away from now to the end of this event.
I would also say so. They've been bumbling about a little bit. Ivan, of course, made that mistake with his reset, which I think cost him the most of the time that he lost. But, of course, a few smaller mistakes here and there, not quite able to handle the pressure like other people like Kyokodo, for example. And he sees himself just losing huge amounts of time again and again. And now he's coming in for the final pit stop, or... Well, yeah, I would say final pit stop at this rate, because 25 minutes, that's definitely something that you are able to manage at this point, I think.
It's going to be tight there for 25 minutes. We haven't seen anybody really put in a big 25-minute stint on the tank so far in this event. So I think this will be a splash and dash for Ivan at this stage, who pits in from 5th position. There is Mr. Colin in 6th. He's got 4.3 seconds of penalty now left to serve. He's been doing wonders in terms of bringing the numbers down that he's been capable of doing. He's been aggressive in terms of the stops so far in this race, but Ivan is out and away without any worries at all, ahead of Mr. Colin, who is about to put a lap down on Kenneth here to move on by no issues at all. 17 seconds back there, or thereabouts at this stage. 16 and a half, maybe 16.3 we'll call it right now. There's your race leader, Kyokodo Sentai. The gap 3.9 seconds and a 1:46.5 that last time by. Penalty comes down by a couple tenths again for Windy. 3.9 seconds, and again, penalty feels the same.
Yeah, it's I think in the late stages of this race, Windy will really have to play this tactically, but really, really well tactically, as in, real-time strategy games pretty much, while he's racing to get this penalty down. But I think there's also a little bit of luck involved, because we know how much slipstream can gain you. So maybe if he just gets a back marker after a pit stop just in front of him, just outside of the range where it slows him down, and he can just, out of the first chicane, is completely able to gain some very, very good time through Curva Grande and the run to Della Roggia, and that alone could gain him half a second, for example. So I think it's also not just a matter of skill, but of course, with how much the cars and the speeds here depend on slipstream. As we've seen in quali, it also depends a little bit on luck now.
Certainly does, as Mikael here, in what is 3rd position, will be feeling like this is one where you just want to leave this race very quickly. Focus on Interlagos as much as possible. This was supposed to be Mikael's challenge to Kyokodo, and it was not the case here today. Has been thoroughly outclassed to the tune of 22.7 seconds at this moment in time. Has been 3rd best all race long, and effectively now you would say here needs to find a solution for the next event to try and bring those gaps down. We don't know what the balance of performance is going to be, what vehicles will be run, but at a track which is very, very balanced coming up, say in 1 week's time, Interlagos is going to be really interesting to see who chooses what.
Yeah, Interlagos is a completely own animal once again, because it has a lot of very high-speed sections, but then this middle sector is just so twisty and winding around, so it'll be very interesting to see what car choices are coming in there. I think the Porsche or the Audi might make another show there, because they have a bit shorter wheelbases, so through these tighter corners they might be able to corner a lot better.
And of course, championship finale at Spa-Francorchamps, a true racer circuit as well. We've seen how everyone here who has raced around that place knows how to be aggressive at the circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. So that we feel is going to be an Audi track, maybe even we might see a little bit of a showing again from the Beetle, which Windy Boy 97 absolutely loved running there. So a lot that could go on at Spa, but for the time being, the focus is on Monza. They've got 21 and a half minutes to go. There is still one more stop available on the doorstep, but Windy here, 3.2 seconds worth of penalty to play with at this stage and behind traffic. So the gap has just slowly crept out again to 5 seconds. Kyokudo has just been toying with the prey.
Yeah, he's in complete control once again. One could say he's the tactician of racing pretty much. Because no matter what happens, he seems to be in absolute control. He seems to be aware of the situation, of how much he has to push. And, well, as I said at the start of this event, he's the barrier or the wall that Windy and Mikael have to try and climb over in this championship. And if nothing else, I think the fight between Windy and Mikael will be very interesting for the rest of this championship. And, with their constant improvement that they've shown so far, and already how much less of a gap there is at this point in time, from Kyokudo to P2, they're constantly growing, as I said. They're constantly learning, they're constantly adapting, and I would be very, very happy to see a much closer battle at Brazil or at Spa, for example.
Especially from where they were 3 months ago in comparison to Spa-Francorchamps. It was a Kyokudo walkaway there at one of the great racing circuits. But this is the thing, they are not just building up for this championship, although there are great prizes on the horizon for this sort of run. They are also thinking about 2021 and, of course, the FIA Nations Games and dealing with all of those, the Motorsports Games and the Nations Cup that has been going on time and time again and being Malta's representative. That has been something worth keeping in mind the longer that this has gone on. And what has been crucial is that Kyokudo has shown he's got the pace. What has also been shown is that everyone can start to challenge him a little bit, and it's been getting closer and closer and closer the more races that we've seen with World Pro Racing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case, but everyone is gonna be hot for trying to challenge internationally, representing their country, and if nothing else, it will be a big incentive besides just trying to catch up to Kyokudo for Windy and Mikael, and of course all the others as well, to just try and constantly improve, just so they could be the ones who get selected in the end to represent Malta in the end.
Well, we've just seen Chris Pateri dive down into the pits, and we've also seen Kenneth there have a moment. Full tank for Chris on the soft tyre. He's going to try and bring it home through 18 minutes worth of racing. They've put 40 laps in on the books right now. Windy will be looking at maybe pitting in the next 2 to 3 laps, we expect, but it could be longer due to the fact that more has been put in. But this stint has been all Kyokudo's. He's turned up the wick here in this penultimate stint.